So my name's Ari Vanderhoeven, and I am a kind of a principal project manager technologist at Seagate Technology. Today's talk is kind of a big survey course talking about our views, Seagate's views, on challenges and opportunities we see in storage security. So there's some areas we'll go into more depth, other areas we're going to kind of defer to other presentations on what's going on in OCP, for example. My experience with security actually began in 2012 when I was working at Microsoft. And we were moving the industry at that time from BIOS to UEFI with Secure Boot. We were requiring TPM 2.0. And we were trying to get to full client compliance in 18 months, which seemed impossible. But we had this big stick called the Windows logo. And I spent 4.5 months in 1 year there just traveling Asia, being an evangelist, ecosystem outreach. And that's kind of been my role ever since, is in different areas, not just security, but sustainability now, circularity, other things. We're trying to bring the industry together. So today, we'd like to show you our view of the world, but we're also looking for feedback from you. So yes, this is a very broad agenda. We're going to start with our view of threats to data security. And some of these are my own personal opinion, but it aligns with Seagate's thoughts. And another part of my role is I'm kind of that glue between what we hear from the ecosystem and what we communicate to the product security office at Seagate and our product teams. So my team owns a lot of the guidance around what features we need to adopt and directions moving forward, because we're the team that interacts the most with customers. So supply chain security is huge for us, and that's something where we're making a big push recently. You know, we had one of our developers was talking to the US Army last week, and we even have a slide that came out of that discussion. So a lot of scrutiny is coming down on us, and we'll talk about that in some detail. Everything is going on in OCP, and I was actually surprised they weren't here because a lot of their initiatives like SAFE, Encrypt and Lock, especially SAFE and Lock, could use a bigger drill down, could use 40 minutes of speaking time instead of the 20 minutes we get at OCP. So as I often do, I'll make my opinion known, because I'd love to see them here next year. PQC security and CNSA 2.0. I think that's pretty common, so we probably won't spend much time on that because I think we're all in the same boat there. We were lucky we bet on crystals to lithium early, so we have implementations ready to go. IEEE 2883, I've got some of the leaders of that effort here in the room, so I'll do my best not to show too much ignorance, but I'm also part of that organization. And then circularity and sustainability goes hand in hand with security. We can't reuse drives unless we can secure the data that's on them and make sure no customer data ever escapes. And then for SBDM attestation, there's a talk right after this on that, so that'll be another short slide. So where do we see the threats? You know, storage devices stay in the ecosystem for years. So there are drives bouncing around out there that may have user data on them. They've been out there for 10 years plus. And we have to keep that in mind. That means threats 10 years from now affect the devices we ship today. 10, 15 years, you really have to think out forward. So sometimes when we hear something coming in from a customer or an organization that we think is, wow, that's just not a realistic threat model, it's not a realistic threat model today. But when we talk to some of the big hyperscalers, their mentality is we have to protect our business for 10, 20 years. And making a mistake today is a huge impact. So do think ahead. And that's something I actually have to evangelize inside my own company. You know, advanced laboratory techniques, you know, government-grade security. Anybody who's shipping government-grade security has to have something that can go into the lab and not be torn apart and somehow the key is grabbed or something like that. You know, I just got a long email from our director of product security at Seagate where, you know, he explained to me how scraping the HR key cannot allow you to unencrypt a drive. But we get asked these questions. And that's the hardware root key. Again, security is a must-have for circularity and CO2 reductions. You know, tens and tens of millions of drives a year are simply destroyed, most of them shredded. And that's looking back at how many drives shipped 5 to 7 years ago per year. You know, standards move slowly. And as threats grow, the pace of standards is a threat itself. You know, that's why we don't look unkindly upon some of these OCP implementations that are coming. You know, and that's the next bullet there, implementations. And then today, we have too many security requirements that differ from each other coming from different partners. So consolidation is important to us. I think it's important to all of us in the room who work in storage. And you know, we also all are dealing with budgets. We have ups and downs in the industry. You know, we got to insulate the security work we do from those ups and downs. And that's something we feel strongly at Seagate about. Let's start with supply chain security. So there are risks in the supply chain. You know, these, I think, are well known to this group. You know, there was SolarWinds 2-3 years ago. Huge impact across the industry. You know, probably billions of dollars lost. Log4j, the CrowdStrike, which was a mistake, not an attack, but look at the impact it had. Again, one of these things, billions of dollars. In some cases, it can be the death knell for a company. You know, we all have to think that way. A security flaw in, say, a Seagate product that's serious destroys our reputation. And that's something that we recognize at the boardroom level. The Linux attempt was really scary because part of it was social engineering, you know, where they got inside the Linux process, they became a good contributor, they became trusted, and you know, we're even doing good work, but at the same time, they were basically putting a Trojan inside of Linux. And fortunately, a Microsoft researcher noticed a performance degradation and called some folks in Linux. They started looking into it, and wow, that was close. What we have to think about is, has that already happened and we don't know about it? So some really scary stuff going on out there. If you wonder why the customers seem really, really strong in these areas, that's something to look at. And you know your product, software composition, managing vulnerabilities, etc. So challenges today. You know, source component analysis is one of the first things you have to do. And even before that, you have to make sure that the developers that you've hired to do your work or any third-party source code that you bring in is trusted. And we set a high bar for that, but then we try and have all these other areas. This is open source, which I just mentioned. And talk about this in more detail in just a little bit. And managing vulnerabilities. And today, unfortunately, this is mostly a manual assessment, no centralized tracking. And then there's a perception versus reality. Are we really doing the job we need to? And this is a message we're definitely taking internally. We feel like we're leaders in a lot of these areas, but internally we're hammering ourselves. So here's some opportunities moving forward. You know, secure coding with static analysis and dynamic analysis. And we have slides that go into more detail, and I have a lot of slides here, so I'm going to try and go here a little bit fast. So secure coding, then now analyzing the source components. SBOMs are part of that, and we'll go more into SBOMs later. But SBOMs are coming. You know, one thing that surprises me is, as a member of the OSP security group, and I think they have other priorities, but we've been talking about doing more around supply chain security for a few years now, and that is coming. But I'm not sure if they'll be leaders or where that falls in the industry. And then secure builds. That includes SALSA, et cetera. So move a little bit faster here. In software composition analysis, SCA, the tool we use is called MEND, but there are other tools out there. I don't want to promote any one tool over another. But it really is a good tool for analyzing packages and source to find third-party code, especially code that's mapped to vulnerabilities, making sure we don't have any license risks, which can be very expensive. And again, Mend is one example of a tool. And then SBOMs, making sure we have a record of everything. Complete software composition descriptions, machine readable, something we can share with external partners. So transparency is so important. And we all know that, we all hear that. Or some of you preach it, depending on which side you are on. And of course, we need both. So I won't go into too much detail here, but I'll try and read through each of the boxes here. So we start with common vulnerabilities and exploits. That's where the Mend tool is the tool we use for that. So that's the box for CVE notification. So let's make sure we start on solid ground. That information goes into the SBOM. And then we have a whole SBOM management portion down here to the left with scans and suppliers and creating the SBOM, doing the analysis, putting it in the database. Then over here we have management of vulnerabilities. So we have to assess risks. You always find vulnerabilities. So it'd be nice not to have this box, but we certainly do. And then we have to decide whether or not to resolve or mark as fixed not needed. And we have to do it for every product. So eventually all this rolls down to an asset database. We create and release an SBOM. We then process that SBOM for vulnerabilities again, determine if it needs remediation, we'd go back up into the vulnerability management box. And finally, we distribute that SBOM, and it's public. Yes, Eric?
Do you find that you have to have published SLAs for fixes, notifications, fixes, and final?
So the question is, yeah, do we have to have published SLAs for fixes and remediation and all this? Not yet, but we're being asked. So, in fact, there is in the OCP data center SAS SATA spec, there is a requirement there on how quickly you have to publish any vulnerabilities you find. Now, it doesn't have to be every vulnerability, but it has to be one that has any potential impact, is the way I read it. Now, since I worked for one of the companies that helped author that, I've been on their side, and I know it works a little differently. So I feel like there is room for determining what should be public and when it should be public. But I agree with overall the purpose of that. So we certainly agree with that mindset. So this is the SBOM itself, workflow diagram, and this is something we created recently internally and are preaching internally. But you've got the third-party open source code, the package manager, and then we're creating libraries that go through testing and analysis, and then we evaluate the code. Then it moves to the software composition analysis tools, and then up into the SBOM repository, and at the same time we analyze any faults we find through the tools or by analyzing the SBOM itself, then we release. So here's some challenges, and Eric, I should have included customer requirements. But source and binary analysis, we can't rely on it for 100% accuracy. SBOMs today still require manual editing, so it is a process. It's something we have to resource for. C and C++ still have many gaps, and we'd like to see them go away. From a security perspective, memory safe code is much better way to go. And we have open source tooling, and then we have commercial tooling. And again, things get so much easier if we're all, and this is kind of a common theme today. Things get so much easier if we're all using kind of the same tools with the same requirements or same types of tools anyway, that follow the same requirements. Customized stuff, differentiation is very dangerous for security. And we hear that from our partners as well. So more standardization is better, and we certainly believe in that because we feel the pain on our side. So, SBOMs can vary in quality, caliber, and consistency. That's why transparency is so important. Again, practice needs to be broadly adopted and refined and be consistent. And again, we have to work on SBOMs, and we'd like the industry to get more involved. So this is the diagram that we just added from a conversation we had with the US Army. And this is a work in progress because we're trying to map the supply chain ecosystem from requirements that come in. And I almost stole a slide from the LOC presentation at the regional summit at OCP that showed like some of the government standards that are coming down and creating a need for things like LOC around cryptography or cryptographic key management. And SBOMs will probably be part of that as well. So you've got all kinds of software providers, you've got all kinds of software stacks, different data formats, software consumers, stakeholders. We don't have there's a lot more to add to this list. But educating developers out in the ecosystem, all the different types of products, and a lot of these, a lot of what we're talking today is focused on storage, but it applies to all devices in the ecosystem. And then looking at attacks and how well are we aware of what attacks are coming, who's helping us with that. Yes, Eric.
Under feeds, you've got threats. Is that really like threat intel kinds of mechanisms?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Under feeds, we have threats. And the question is that about intel of incoming threats? And yes, it is, because this came from the US Army. So that's, they have that national vulnerability database right next to it. So good question. Okay, part of our open source management is going through the checklists that we have for management. Make sure we're updating, and we have 2 investigative scorecards we look for open source. There's the Linux Foundation, and then there's OpenSSF, Open Source Security Foundation. There may be others, so please inform me if we have a partial list here. So product team practices, pretty much everything I just said. Use SCA tools if you aren't already. Again, we're using MEN today, I think, across our hard drives that I work with. SBOMs should be generated for every device, or you should have a path to getting there, because that's going to become a requirement. And again, think out, think forward. And of course, follow best practices for open source, for license compliance, for security awareness. Okay, let's move on to SAFE. And SAFE was kind of dropped on us about a year ago. We didn't see it coming, and like a lot of things, and I have some sympathy for how it was done, because I've been in the security group, OCP security group, for some time. And we started with wanting to have scorecards where you could, or badges, where you could be gold, silver, or bronze. And of course, nobody wanted to be silver or bronze. So it ended up being a lot of effort and no outcome. So they moved to getting a small group of folks together. I think for this one, it was, I want to say AMD, Microsoft, and Google at first, and I think there are others who have joined. And coming up with implementations rather than going through the whole requirements, consensus throughout the whole industry. This moves faster. And our initial reaction was, wow, this is a whole bunch of requirements. It's duplicative of other stuff we have going on, because we do get auditing requests from different customers. So we started off a little bit frustrated until we really dug in And when we dug in, there was nothing but goodness here. And we immediately found value in it. And for those of you, I think most people in this room know about SAFE, but what SAFE is it's basically a very long list of review areas. And if you click on that, you're going to find, I mean, lines and lines and lines of review areas. And some are more important than others. I'd like them to weight them or prioritize them, would be my feedback. But while it was really good list, comprehensive, you can tell a lot of effort went into it. And their initial focus was on CPUs, GPUs, and FPGA. So storage is kind of phase 2 in this. But we have been getting strong feedback this year on pushing forward with SAFE. And after we did a lot of analysis, we decided to move ahead. And we really appreciate the goals. Reducing overhead and redundancy of security audits. So something that's important to us is to get the whole industry on board. We don't see a lot of OEMs yet. So we'd prefer there to be one audit rather than lots of different audits based on different companies' perception of what they need, because it should all be the same for storage devices. So, provide security conformance assurance to device consumers. So, part of the SAFE program is, there's really 2 parts to it. One is, ideally, it's a way to get your device in the OCP marketplace. That's fine. But really, it's to build confidence with your customers, whether or not you put that device in the marketplace or not. So I see it as having 2. And I think the third thing is, it's just good security practices. We are going to make changes, lots of changes, based on our OCP SAFE audits. And at Seagate, we are moving forward. Our goal is to have a short form, which doesn't show all your vulnerabilities, just the ones that they think are important and common, published by the end of year. So we're on board after being initially very skeptical.
Another question. Are you seeing SAFE help you with potential requirements coming out of the EU with the new Cybersecurity Act?
So the question is, can SAFE help us with the new requirements coming out of the EU in the Cybersecurity Act? My answer to that is I don't know, but also that I hope so. And if you have that feedback, and we'll go through, I think one place to start is with the review areas, very long list. But if we need to get those 2 together, I do know that the companies involved are very interested in what's going on in the EU. So I hope the answer is yes, but I can't say for sure. Yes, John?
I thought the scope of SAFE was only the OCP specification requirement.
So the question isn't OCP SAFE just for the OCP specification requirements? My answer is no. My answer is that's a small part of it. A bigger part of it is some of our biggest customers are asking for it. And also, I think even if you aren't doing it for sales or for OCP compliance, it is good for security practices. You will improve your security.
If I may, so the OCP security project had a meeting this morning. It was IO Active briefing SAFE, and it was recorded. So you may want to share that is or will be available.
Yes. So the comment is that this morning there was an OCP security meeting. I missed it. I was preparing for this presentation. And IO Active, which is a security lab auditing company, consulting company out of Seattle. I come from Seattle, so I even know where their office is. Gave a presentation today in the security group, and we'll try and look that up. It was recorded. I do know that the security OCP meetings, sometimes the recordings come out much later, but they're public, yeah. So that is, and also there is, usually Stuart Yoder sends out meeting minutes, and they're very good. So we'll try and share that around, ask one of us if you don't have it. I haven't checked if the minutes came out yet or not. So this is what we just talked through. This is from the OCP site. And this, I think this, again, kind of speaks to what John Geldman just mentioned is, isn't it just for the OCP marketplace? But it's not. This is how it's kind of proposed, but really it's bigger than that. If I were to redo this diagram, which I didn't make, this came from the OCP site, I would probably add somehow about how it improves more about how it really improves your device security, which reduces risk. And I would talk about how it can help you gain customer confidence.
Sorry, my question was specifically, it is clear to me OCP has the authority to judge OCP specs. They do not necessarily have the authority to test me against EU requirements.
Yeah. So the comment was, OCP has a right to judge us, if we're device makers, against OCP requirements. They do not have the right or ability to judge us against, say, EU requirements.
Accepted credibility, possibly.
Accepting credibility. So this is just a look at some of the broad areas in documentation and code review. And certainly, like a lot of the documentation we aren't providing yet, and this will force us to provide it, which creates more transparency. And then there are areas of code review, like auditing and telemetry, where everyone's going to have gaps. And one thing they mentioned to me in the early OCP reviews, and I think this was mentioned in public in the OCP security group, is that it's pretty typical for the first pass to have 20 plus vulnerabilities discovered, most of which can be fixed with firmware changes rather quickly. So again, a benefit of participating in the program is it's almost like a free testing. You're getting a great test pass for free.
Yeah, but one thing that needs to remember that the code review up until now was only for the security part of your device, let's say, and the SAFE program now asks you to review the entire code on the drive, which makes cost and process.
Yeah, so the comment, and it's a good comment, is before we were only being asked to review the security portions of code in your firmware, for example. And now with SAFE, it's much more expansive and it adds costs. And I will say we had and also I'll speak here to a moment to, I think there are now at least 8, last I checked, companies that are able to do these audits for you. Those audits aren't cheap. And depending on the size of your company and the resources you have, it's not cheap. Fortunately, we had budget lying around. Again, not pulling back on security despite all we're going through, despite what's gone for the past year and a half. But that's a challenge. But we also see SAFE as an opportunity. Yes.
A vendor and the code reviewer, let's say, how does that get adjudicated? And who decides to go forward and get the gold star or not get the gold star?
So the question is, if there is a disagreement between say the customer or the SAFE audit and your company, who decides who's right? And from my experience, it's usually we go and talk. Most of our discussions are one-on-one under NDA with the companies that are our customers, and we usually go and have that discussion, and it forces.
But this is a third-party process, right? That is tried to be managed by OCP. I mean, I don't quite understand the diagram you showed before. I looked at it.
Oh. Oh, sorry.
We don't quite get sort of what the steps are.
Okay, so I understand that. I really recommend going to the OCP. In all the security groups in OCP, they actually have an OCP safe subpage. And it has a ton of information, and it has a link to their GitHub. But that by itself is probably, back to my earlier comment, I wish they were here, the authors and promoters of this, to do a 40-minute session as opposed to 20-minute sessions. So great question, thank you. Yes,
so
sir.
maybe to help, the vendor is in control of the safe assessment process in terms of engagement and ultimately the release of the information. So you the vendor, decide whether or not you're going to continue or release.
So Eric pointed out that you as a vendor, you have total control. So you hire a third-party auditor, they work for you. You then decide, and actually I have this diagram internally, where we get to a point where we say, check or go, yes or no. Do we publish a short form report, or we just use this as a lot of learning for ourselves? And then if some vendor wants to have a conversation with us about why we didn't publish a short form, then we'll have that conversation. So you have control as a vendor. Thank you. So I'm going to speed up here a little bit, but again, go to the OCP Safe page. This is something we came up with internally, so this slide is a good one, kind of how we broadly talked about the different areas that we're reviewing. And then this is a partial list of everything I talked about in that requirements report, which is on the GitHub. And we'll move on now to Calyptra and lock. This is partly being done in the CHIPS Alliance. Is really where a lot of the conversations are happening around Calyptra and lock. I know there are folks in the room here who are more involved with both than I am. I have an action item to get us to join the CHIPS Alliance. I think it's $4,000 or something like that. It's not a big number, but I don't know if we're a member today or not. You're going to correct me. So Eric?
So you'll need to be a member of the Linux Foundation.
That's right.
You do not have to join the CHIPS Alliance, but you have to sign the CLA.
So the comment is, you have to be a member of the Linux Foundation. You do not, which is on top here, you do not have to be a member of CHIPS Alliance, but you do have to sign the
cooperative license.
Okay, the cooperative license agreement, the CLA. And to be fair, I asked these guys to correct me as I go along.
By the way, there is one CHIPS Alliance CLA, and it covers all CHIPS Alliance projects, not just lock.
So the answer is there's one CHIPS Alliance CLA that covers all projects, including Calyptra and including lock. So, Calyptra is, it's basically there to have a root of trust for measurement. It's not a discrete chip. It's an IP block that you add to your firmware. Lots of use cases we won't go into here, but it's really around, to me, it's really largely around attestation. Making sure that the device owner can prove the device is running genuine firmware, that the device manufacturer vouches for the authenticity of that, and again, a root of trust for measurement. Allows you to securely configure your root of trust capabilities. It's a one-size-fits-all root of trust, and it includes the DICE as service API. Eric.
So Calyptra is a hardware block. It's not just software.
Yes, it is an RTL. So the comment is it's a hardware block, not just a software, not just a firmware block. And this brings up a very good point because it's an RTL change, and that means and and we get a lot of feedback on this. I'm not going to just talk about myself, but other companies I've talked to, is there are concerns around A, being the first ones to do this in a hardware device or storage device, because if we implement Calyptra and it has flaws in it, it can get very expensive for us, both in sales and in reputation and in, perhaps breaking some laws that we have to pay fines for. So, it's kind of a scary first step. I very much agree with the long-term goal of Calyptra. I am, frankly, a proponent for it inside Seagate, at least trying to keep an open mind. But there are concerns. Yeah. Oh.
We need to let him get through his presentation. We can have hallway discussions afterwards, too.
Well,
Okay.
he pointed out Calyptra, what's on the street is Calyptra 1.0, but 2.0 is in the oven, and it's pretty significant. It includes what's quantum crypto and other stuff, and it is also a hardware component.
Yeah. So the comment is the Calyptra 2.0, I think, is scheduled to come out next spring, and we really need to keep in mind, the functionality that's coming in. So I know, like this summer, they added LMF support, and I think they're close to having working PQC support, if not already. But there are a lot of things also that Calyptra doesn't have today. Very high level here. And, Seagate, be honest about you, we're working on device as a service for our own root of trust. And DICE ownership transfer is something that I don't think anyone has yet. So, again, Calyptra is not in any storage device, but I think we all have these gaps. Or many of us do. This is a worksheet that I'll include because we put quite a bit of time into this, and this was how we were having conversations with our partners about where we are today and what Calyptra offers. Now, we started this process a while ago, almost 2 years ago, but I think I've updated this to what's in Calyptra today, but I could have gaps, so don't take this too literally. And again, 2 pages, and we went through all this analysis on our root of trust. And frankly, those conversations went pretty well, but we do have to be as transparent as we can be, especially until the day comes that Calyptra is, if it goes that way, is a common ROT. Okay, OCP lock. I know there are others in here who know more about this than I do, and the spec isn't out yet. I understand there'll be some draft that's available later this fall. Stands for Layered Open Source Cryptography Key Management, which I think is less of a stretch for an acronym than SAFE was. There are risks, of course, and they have, and one of the risks too are different government requirements that are coming down through Congress and through different agencies, including the NSA, et cetera. Then you have, there have been flaws that they point out in how keys are managed in the past. And it's a problem. Storage key management is critical to get right. I don't know how many times we've gone through our key wrapping under NDA with certain partners. Implementations vary in quality, and this is coming from them, this is not coming from me. Auditing implementations are resource intensive, and I think this is, again, a customer complaint. When they're trying to look at a product, they come and I've been in these conversations, and they have to go to every single company out there, and there are a lot of storage companies out there, especially on the SSD side. So understand the problems. Now, lock does require Calyptra. It's built on Calyptra. So again, they are asking folks to come and join Calyptra. I think lock is still more closed, but that will probably change after they release I think the 1.0 spec is due, last I heard, it was due like in March or April next year. Yeah, leveraging Calyptro. So let's try to move on. This can be very short, but we are, we bet early on crystals to lithium. Again, you need both XMSS and LMS, and this is pretty clear cut. I think this is all publicly known material. All I say is this is a high priority for us, and we have it on our roadmap. Okay, that's just a copy of 800-208. And one thing I will note is we weren't able to get this on our roadmap until this summer because there wasn't full HSM support for it. For example, LMF wasn't supported yet. And now that's no longer true. So we work with a company called Thales, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But there are others out there. And so, we haven't always done our key management in HSMs. And that's feedback we got, strong feedback we got. So the other thing I'd say about PQC is move to HSMs. HSM is a hardware security module. IEEE, we've got the experts here in the room. And this is a group that I'm involved in, and John Michael back there is involved in, Eric's involved in it, and there are other, Mr. Suhler is very involved in it, and made a big splash with our release of the 283.22 spec, and now we've just are about to release the 2883.1 spec. So really what this is about is sanitization methods. And now we're adding with 22 with the .1. Sorry, I gotta. And I think moving forward, we talk about sanitized overwrite for hard drives, for example. But moving forward, the feedback we're getting, especially from our biggest partners, is crypto erase is the main method. And then how are you doing this correctly, and how do you verify sanitization? It's a big part of the .1 spec. So we're running out of time here. So I'm going to just go through this very quickly. One thing here I'll point out though, and this is from the spec itself, is when we talk to partners, especially government grade security, they are thinking about virtuoso. And I'd almost add another category, which would be, like nation state level. And, it says purge is unlikely at that level. Especially if you're doing crypto erase. Can't say impossible. And then destruct, we say almost impossible, but if your data is not encrypted, even a tiny 2 millimeter by 2 millimeter piece of data can hold multiple copies of the Encyclopedia Britannica. And that is a threat. So destruct alone does not pass the test. Okay, I'm gonna wrap up here because the next talk is on SPDM and attestation, and I'm gonna go to questions. We only have 5 minutes, I believe. So, yeah, we have 5 minutes.
I'll project it out so you don't have to repeat it.
Okay.
Because I can't figure out a way to keep the mic. Yeah, I can't think of a way to keep this question short, but as a JEDIC chair, I've faced a number of these transitions where with one specification, the NIST issued the recommendation of switching from 256-bit to 384-bit. We were able to incorporate that without significant impact, but then when we went to the next device, it was a doubling in size of the device to implement the security mechanisms. And then 2 months ago, we get the post-quantum notification. Now, so we're talking about two major changes in 2 years. And so one of the questions is, how do we keep on that treadmill where these things are changing so rapidly? And then the second, of course, is that time frame that they're talking about needing to have post-quantum in place by 2030. Mm-hmm. That's only 6 years out, and if the target device is a car, I don't think we're expecting that people are going to auto-destruct their cars after 6 years and buy a new car. So it's a whole bunch of questions rolled in there. I'm not sure how to summarize that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great question, because a lot of us, and I see many of them sitting in the room here, are so in tune and we have so many resources that we're talking to the government years out, and we're getting fed information that, like if you're doing IoT devices in a car or storage devices in a car, I don't have a good answer for that, because I doubt you have we're talking about companies with tens of thousands of employees. You're probably not working on that scale, so let me think about that and get some more information from you maybe afterwards.
You might want to talk about, what is it, SNDL? You might want to address SNDL, which is the common acronym for Store Now, Decrypt Later, which is what we're all worried about with the post-quantum stuff. Yep.
Wow. Yeah. The acronym says it all. Yeah.
And to your earlier question, it's all about the threat landscape. So we are chasing, unlike technology areas where we're advancing goodness and fun and whatnot, we are chasing an adversary or adversaries who at every turn are better equipped, better motivated, better funded, you name it. And we are chasing them. And so the changes you're seeing for a rarity, we're trying to do something proactive with post-quantum crypto. Many of the other things are very reactive, and there are exploits and attacks that are underway. So it's important to keep in mind that this is a very much moving target. We say it's a cat and mouse game. We're the mouse.
All right. Last comment from Paul Suhler, who's also one of my betters, as all these guys are.
And my understanding, CNSA applies specifically to systems that contain national security data. So a car manufacturer is not going to be required by CNSA to do anything. And did I get that right?
Yeah, I believe so. But it will depend on your customer. So for us, it depends broadly because so many of our customers demand government-grade security. So whether that's a requirement from a car manufacturer or not, I would agree with Paul and say not, but I don't know.
Secret Service escalates.
Except for the Secret Service. All right, we're out of time, but thank you very much.